Hi there, welcome back to the second part of my tech tip on 24th EuroSport at the 2022 slotcar World Championships. In the last video, we left off with this very shot you can see in front of you, with my chassis, a motor and a body shell there. And if you haven't seen the series, then I'm going to put a link up in this corner now to have a look. But I've gone through basically my chassis choice, I've gone through a little bit about motors and body shell, but today we're going to find out what caused my downfall in 24th EuroSport. We call it a downfall, but basically it wasn't the kind of performance I would hope to expect to get in 24th EuroSport at the World Championships. So let's take a closer look and find out why. So let's take a look at the wheels and tyres, or hubs and tyres, that I used in the 24th EuroSport final. So you can see this is an S&K 10.5mm hub, and it's one that I have drilled out. So you can see these holes that go through it here. So I've drilled out the hub as well, helps reduce the weight of the hub. Now the wing car guys go a step further and they use metal hubs or magnesium hubs, and they actually drill out all around the inside of the hub as well. They drill everything out to make it really, really light. But these do need some strength as well. So I haven't gone any further than just drilling out that part of the hub. It doesn't reduce the weight by much, but every little bit it helps in order to help it accelerate faster and brake faster, because you're not accelerating sort of rotating mass or decelerating rotating mass. So having lightweight hubs can actually help your acceleration and braking. You can also see that there is some little bit of balancing gone on here inside. And if you haven't seen my video on balancing, I'll put a link up there so you can have a look at the balancer that I've got and balancing hubs. Not the best of balancing in the world with this one. It was rather quick to do, I think, this one. So have a look at the rubber. It's pretty close cell. And this one you can see comes from around about 2019, because I've got 19 inside the hub there. So this type of rubber comes from around 2019. Now, it's often good if you find a batch of rubber that you like, that gives maybe good grip or has a certain characteristic you like. Maybe it's hard wearing, maybe it's got good grip and it's hard wearing, which is the best sort of rubber you can get. Then it is worth trying to buy loads more from that very batch if you possibly can, and keep it in stock. And when you store it, it helps if you store it at a reasonable temperature, so not too hot. You don't want to heat up the rubber and let all the oils escape from the rubber. You also want to try and avoid ultraviolet light, because again, that can damage the rubber a little bit if you leave it out in sort of ultraviolet light. So basically, don't store it on your windowsill. Maybe store it in a cool, dry, dark place. And that's probably the best way you can store your donuts to make sure they last for as long as possible. So as I said, I store them generally as donuts. I don't make up too many tyres at a time. And if I do, I only turn them down roughly so they're much bigger than they need to be. But if you want to glue up your own, have a look at my video up here and I'll tell you how to glue up your own donuts or re-sponge your own hubs. It's a very useful thing to do. Saves a lot of money rather than buying new hubs every single time. And it's a fairly easy process. So give it a go, try it out, and I'm sure you'll be impressed with the results and the money saving that you can have if you don't do your own tyres as it currently stands. You can see this little mark here. Now that's the mark to show me where the grub screw is. It just helps doing tyre changes quickly, because you know where the hole in the rubber is to find the grub screw. Some people peel the rubber back from the edge of the hub, but I find when you do that, when the tyre's spinning very fast, it can expand just a little bit at that point, and you don't get quite so smooth rotation of the tyre, and it makes your car a little bit unbalanced and vibrate a little bit more. By actually putting a hole into the tyre, you keep the rubber attached to the hub all the way round, and it stops that rubber from coming apart here and bouncing around down the track. So I prefer to maybe put a hole in my rubber rather than pulling it back off the edge of the hub. It's also very important that you get nice smooth edges on your tyre. The edges shouldn't be rough. They shouldn't be wobbly like this. You know, when you turn your wheel around, you should have a nice smooth flat edge with slightly rounded corners. And so there shouldn't be any chunks missing out the side of it. It shouldn't be sort of hacked apart. Also, it's handy if it just can overhang the hub a fraction on the end. Not too much. You know, we're only talking a fraction of a millimetre, but that helps with the adhesion of the rubber to the edge of the hub, and it also protects the hub slightly from impact damage against a barrier. So if you come off and you hit the barrier, that small bit of rubber around the outside can also protect the hub a little bit. There. Now in ISRA, we're allowed, I think, 20.6 millimetres wide, whereas in the UK we're allowed 21 millimetres wide. So we just have to make sure that any tyres that I did for UK racing are slightly narrowed for ISRA racing. So that is the hubs and the rubber that I used in the World Championship final. Pretty good stuff. Well, before you find out what did cause perhaps my downfall in 24th Eurosport, or what I believe caused my downfall in 24th Eurosport, let's have a look at one of the motors that I used for 24th Eurosport. This one here is, on the armature it says 95. Well, that means it's a 19 turns of 25 gauge wire. So 19 turns round the stack of 25 gauge wire. You can see it's actually, this one here I believe is a Cahosa 28 magnet V setup. Now the V setup means that the magnets on the top and bottom are slightly beveled in a sort of a V format there. So basically the tips of the magnets, there's not quite so big a height on the tips of the magnets when compared to the part of the magnet that glues to the can there. You can see it's done a race. The brush is worn in a little bit here. There's still plenty of brush wear left. You can see if I bring it in slightly closer here that the brush hoods have a slot cut in them, and that allows the spring to push the brush quite a long way against the commutator. You can see the capped commutator there, so that basically that's designed to try and hold the commutator more stable as the arm spins very fast. And just to give you some idea, these armatures at 5 volts may very well spin 120,000 RPM at 5 volts. And you can see these gears that we're using on them. This pinion here has only got 5 teeth. So I was running 539 on my EuroSport car, so a 39 tooth spur gear against this. That's quite a ratio. That's asking a lot out of these motors. But by revving the motors a lot, you get quite a high gyroscopic effect, which helps the car stay in line and obviously avoids the car sort of tipping and moving around in the corners. So it tends to work out the more revs you can get out your motor, the more stable the car can be. But obviously you've still got to have good top end at the end of it. So this was one of the motors. The other motors I used were very similar to this. I think I did use one hotter wind. I might very well have used something like an 18 turns of 24.5, or maybe even a 17 turns of 24.5, something like that I might have used. I can't remember exactly what the motor was that I borrowed from Lee Parsons. But it was a good motor, and I rebuilt it for him afterwards. And it didn't wear out very much at all. It was actually a really, really nice motor. But I did have some of my own that had magnet problems. I had a few accidents in practice, etc., and it cracked the magnet joint. I did have a couple of motors where the magnets got totally smashed, so they're going to have to go back and be repaired. Probably new magnets glued in and then re-zapped. So there's quite a lot of effort needs to go into repairing my motors that I used at that event. So I kept you waiting, but what was the cause of me not performing as well as I should have done maybe in 24th Eurosport? What was the cause of having an ill-handling car? Well, it was all down to that level of grip that I said earlier on and how I'd set the car up. Now, normally at such a big event with so many cars running around the track gets really, really, really rubbered up. And it did. There was a lot of rubber on the track. But also what tends to happen is when that rubber build-up happens on the track, it tends to dry out and the rubber itself becomes sort of more grainy, a bit like you can see in Formula 1 racing where all the grains of the rubber come off the track and stick to the tyres and you can see the big lumps of rubber. It becomes a little bit like that as the rubber dries out. But at this World Championships, the rubber didn't dry out. it stayed soft and sticky on the track. Now, normally it dries out, partially because of the temperature in the room, leaving it overnight, say the pure amount of cars that were on there. But this time, probably due to the fact that the room was quite clean, the floor was generally not so dusty, the temperature was fairly consistent in the room, and probably the way it was gripped in the first place, there was a lot of grip put down onto the track. It never really dried out, and it stayed sticky for the whole race, or for the whole event, even overnight. And we came back the next day for the semis and the final. It was still really, really grippy. And I wasn't planning for that. I didn't even think that would be an issue. I expected the grip to get less and less. And that led me to not setting the front of my car up correctly. I had the front of my car set up so that the front of it was very, very low onto the track, and it was picking up rubber all the way along here. Now, with really sticky rubber, with a very high build-up of really sticky rubber, I probably needed to put extra washers in my guide and raise the front of my car just to get the front of that car tipping a little bit like this as it entered a corner, and getting those back wheels to move more progressively around the corner. And I was running it too low. So what was happening was, when I braked for a corner, the front of the car was digging into all that rubber and getting stuck in the rubber. Sometimes it would skim over the top, sometimes it would dig in, and then that would cause the back end to not perform the way I wanted it, and the car to be very, very unpredictable. Also, combined with maybe a slightly lighter front end, that wasn't a good move. So I really struggled in that respect, and I was rather silly, and I didn't make the front of my chassis have the correct setup. And I really sort of kicked myself afterwards. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I play with the front setup and get the front ride height correct on my car? So that, to me, was probably where I went wrong in 24th EuroSport. So let's take a look at the final few moments of the 24th EuroSport final, which was an amazing race. Now, I was in it, so I didn't really see the end quite so closely because I was trying to stay out of the way of some of the others. But when you have a look, that was an absolutely amazing race. And it was really, really close between two of the key competitors of the whole week.
All of us can wait until the race ends. It's very, very close. Let's go.
Ready.
So that was it. 24th EuroSport over. World Championships over for another year. Except for the after party. And that came later. At the end of the 2 long weeks, it's very nice to have a nice meal, a few drinks with people, and then a bit of a party afterwards. Catch up on various things that you probably haven't had a chance to talk about during the whole of the World Championships. And just cement that friendship that you've made with new people that you've met, new racers, and have a good laugh and a joke around. So it's really nice to finish the 2 weeks with that nice party at the end. And that generally happens at every ISRA slot racing event. And it's a really nice thing to happen. But there we have it. It was then over for another year. So where are we next year? Well, we're in the USA. So stay tuned for the next episode where I talk about what ISRA involves a little bit more and what you can do to get yourself into the World Championships next year. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the big C, hit the thumbs up, and if you really like my videos, please contribute using the super thanks button down below. Any contributions are very, very much appreciated. And I'll see you all again next time where we talk about USA 2023.